Section 9 of Pirates of Panama, The Buccaneers of America, by A.O. Exquemelin, translated by G.A. Williams. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Acacia Wood. Chapter 7, Part 1. Lolonois equips a fleet to land upon the Spanish islands of America, with intent to rob, sack, and burn whatsoever he met with. Of this design, Lolonois giving notice to all the pirates, whether at home or abroad, he got together in a little while above 400 men, beside which there was then in Tortuga another pirate, named Michael de Basco, who by his piracy had got riches sufficient to live at ease, and go no more abroad, having withal the office of major of the island. But seeing the great preparations that Lolonois made for this expedition, he joined him, and offered him that if he would make him his chief captain by land, seeing he knew the country very well, and all its avenues, he would share in his fortunes, and go with him. They agreed upon articles, to the great joy of Lolonois, knowing that Basco had done great actions in Europe, and had the repute of a good soldier. Thus they all embarked in 8 vessels, that of Lolonois being the greatest, having 10 guns of indifferent carriage. All things being ready, and the whole company on board, they set sail together about the end of April, being in all 660 persons. They steered for that part called Bayala, north of Hispaniola. Here they took into their company some French hunters, who voluntarily offered themselves, and here they provided themselves with victuals necessaries for their voyage. From hence they sailed again the last of July, and steered directly to the eastern cape of the isle called Punta de Espada. Hereabouts, espying a ship from Puerto Rico, bound for New Spain, laden with cocoanuts, Lolonois commanded the rest of the fleet to wait for him near Savona, on the east of Cape Punta de Espada, he alone intending to take the said vessel. The Spaniards, though they had been in sight full 2 hours, and knew them to be pirates, yet would not flee, but prepared to fight, being well armed and provided. The combat lasted 3 hours, and then they surrendered. This ship had 16 guns and 50 fighting men aboard. They found in her 120,000 weight of cocoa, 40,000 pieces of 8, and the value of 10,000 more in jewels. Lolonois sent the vessel presently to Tortuga to be unladed, with orders to return as soon as possible to Savona, where he would wait for them. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet being arrived at Savona, met another Spanish vessel coming from Coman with military provisions to Hispaniola, and money to pay the garrisons there. This vessel they also took, without any resistance, though mounted with 8 guns. In it were 7,000 weight of powder, a great number of muskets, and like things, with 12,000 pieces of 8. These successes encouraged the pirates, they seemingly very lucky beginnings, especially finding their fleet pretty well recruited in a little time. For the first ship arriving at Tortuga, the governor ordered it to be instantly unladen, and soon after sent back, with fresh provisions and other necessaries, to Lolonois. This ship he chose for himself, and gave that which he commanded to his comrade Anthony Dupuy. Being thus recruited with men in lieu of them he had lost in taking the prizes, and by sickness, he found himself in a good condition to set sail for Maracaibo, in the province of Nueva Venezuela, in the latitude of 12 degrees 10 minutes north. This island is 20 leagues long and 12 broad. To this port also belong the islands of Onega and Monges. The east side thereof is called Cape St. Roman, and the western side Cape of Caquibacoa. The gulf is called, by some, the Gulf of Venezuela, but the pirates usually call it the Bay of Maracaibo. At the entrance of this gulf are 2 islands extending from east to west. That towards the east is called Isla de las Vigilias, or the Watch Isle, because in the middle is a high hill, on which stands a watch house. The other is called Isla de las Palomas, or the Isle of Pigeons. Between these 2 islands runs a little sea, or rather lake of fresh water, 60 leagues long and 30 broad, which disgorging itself into the ocean, dilates itself about the said 2 islands. Between them is the best passage for ships, the channel being no broader than the flight of a great gun, of about 8 pounds. On the Isle of Pigeons standeth a castle, to impede the entry of vessels, all being necessitated to come very nigh the castle, by reason of two banks of sand on the other side, with only 14 feet water. Many other banks of sand there are in this lake, as that called El Tablazo, or the Great Table, no deeper than 10 feet, 40 leagues within the lake. Others there are that have no more than 6, 7, or 8 feet in depth. All are very dangerous, especially to mariners unacquainted with them. West hereof is the city of Maracaibo, very pleasant to the view, its houses being built along the shore, having delightful prospects all round. The city may contain 3 or 4,000 persons, slaves included, all which make a town of reasonable bigness. There are judged to be about 800 persons able to bear arms, all Spaniards. Here are one parish church, well built and adorned, 4 monasteries, and 1 hospital. The city is governed by a deputy governor, substituted by the governor of the Caracas. The trade here exercised is mostly in hides and tobacco. The inhabitants possess great numbers of cattle and many plantations, which extend 30 leagues in the country, especially towards the great town of Gibraltar, where are gathered great quantities of cocoa nuts and all other garden fruits, which serve for the regale and sustenance of the inhabitants of Maracaibo, whose territories are much drier than those of Gibraltar. Hither those of Maracaibo send great quantities of flesh, they making returns in oranges, lemons, and other fruits, for the inhabitants of Gibraltar want flesh, their fields not being capable of feeding cows or sheep. Before Maracaibo is a very spacious and secure port, wherein may be built all sorts of vessels, having great convenience of timber, which may be transported thither at little charge. Nigh the town lies also a small island called Borica, where they feed a great number of goats, which cattle the inhabitants use more for their skins than their flesh or milk, they sliding these two, unless while they are tender and young kids. In the fields are fed some sheep, but of a very small size. In some islands of the lake, and in other places hereabouts, are many savage Indians, called by the Spaniards bravos, or wild. These could never be reduced by the Spaniards, being brutish and untamable. They dwell mostly towards the west side of the lake, in little huts built on trees growing in the water, so to keep themselves from innumerable mosquitoes, or gnats, which infest and torment them night and day. To the east of the said lake are whole towns of fishermen, who likewise live in huts built on trees, as the former. Another reason of this dwelling is the frequent inundations, for after great rains the land is often overflown for 2 or 3 leagues, there being no less than 25 great rivers that feed this lake. The town of Gibraltar is also frequently drowned by these, so that the inhabitants are constrained to retire to their plantations. Gibraltar, situate at the side of the lake, about 40 leagues within it, receives its provisions of flesh, as has been said, from Maracaibo. The town is inhabited by about 1,500 persons, whereof 400 may bear arms; the greatest part of them keep shops, wherein they exercise one trade or another. In the adjacent fields are numerous plantations of sugar and cocoa, in which are many tall and beautiful trees, of whose timber houses may be built, and ships. Among these are many handsome and proportionable cedars, 7 or 8 feet about, of which they can build boats and ships, so as to bear only one great sail, such vessels being called piraguas. The whole country is well furnished with rivers and brooks, very useful in droughts, being then cut into many little channels to water their fields and plantations. They plant also much tobacco, well esteemed in Europe, and for its goodness is called their tobacco de sacerdotes, or priests' tobacco. They enjoy nigh 20 leagues of jurisdiction, which is bounded by very high mountains perpetually covered with snow. On the other side of these mountains is situate a great city called Merida, to which the town of Gibraltar is subject. All merchandise is carried hence to the aforesaid city on mules, and that but at one season of the year, by reason of the excessive cold in those high mountains. On the said mules returns are made in flour of meal, which comes from towards Peru, by the way of Estafe. Thus far I thought good to make a short description of the lake of Maracaibo, that my reader might the better comprehend what I shall say concerning the actions of pirates in this place, as follows. Lolonois, arriving at the Gulf of Venezuela, cast anchor with his whole fleet out of sight of